Have you ever noticed a callus on the inside of your big toe that just never goes away? Do you have a big toe that goes towards your other toes that maybe has even progressed into a bunion? Well, in this video, we're going to assess and address your big toe extension. Now, being able to extend your big toe is going to affect how we can move over the ground, how our arch is able to change shape, and even what is happening up in our hips. So first we're going to do is we're going to look at big toe extension range of motion. Now, what we're going to do here is we're going to look at lifting your big toe up. When you go to do this, you want to make sure that this ball of your foot here, this first empty piece, stays down as you go to lift up. We're looking to be able to get about 70 degrees of extension here. Now, you can get away with having about 65 or 45 degrees of extension, but the end goal is really to be able to get to that 70 degrees. Without that range of motion, we're going to have a compensation or adaptation to be able to get over our foot that's going to affect how we load tissues in our foot and all the way up into our hip. The other thing to take note too is as I lift this big toe up, you can see how my arch naturally rises and shortens a little bit more. This is called the wingless mechanism and is an important component for being able to create a rigid foundation here to be able to lift off and push forward over the ground. We can also think too, if you're never able to create that shortening in your foot and ankle, in your foot here, then you're not going to have a good place to be able to lengthen from. So it's one half of the range of motion that we really need to be able to have happen in the foot to complement the other half of the range of motion of that shock absorption and loading. Now, another reason that we can have some limitation in this big toe extension is if we're limited in our big toe flexion. Now, with our big toe flexion, we're going to look at the ability for our big toe to be able to flex. And we want it to be able to get to about 45 degrees of flexion. This flexion is going to help complement the pronation and relaxation of that arch, but also thinking too, if your big toe is stuck in extension, it has nowhere else to go. So, assessing both of those ranges of motions are important components when we're looking at being able to move over our foot and getting that big toe extension. Now, if you're limited in that big toe extension, the big toe flexion going down, an easy exercise to do is simply to take a yoga block. And you don't have to have a yoga block, you can just use the ground. But I like it for separating the big toe from the other toes. And you're just looking to push your foot down towards the ground. Now, as I'm here, I'm making sure that I'm not just capturing the end of my toe, but that big toe as a whole. So I'm getting my foot up and over and making sure that it is pushing straight down to the ground and not towards an angle. You should feel a stretch across the top of your foot and maybe into your shin. You might feel a little bit of cramping in the bottom of your foot with it. So try to maybe not go as aggressively as you're going into it. Hold for about 30 seconds or so. You can even do a little bit of a press of trying to push your big toe into the block as that feels okay, and then relaxing and letting it sink down into it a little bit more. Afterwards, you can retest your range of motion in both directions and see if it feels a little bit better. Now, the other thing too is that if your big toe is already off to the other side or towards those other toes, that is going to affect its range of motion for flexion or extension. So you're going to work on addressing that by doing this twist move where we're kind of dragging that foot and placing it down. And I demonstrate that in another YouTube video that you can check out. Now, to work on the big toe extension, what we're going to do is we're going to work on coming up and over our foot and lifting your heel up. So as I'm here and doing that, I am now in some extension. I'm focusing on making sure that I didn't come so far forward that I've lost the basic contact here. But I'm coming up and over, keeping that first met head down. Now, once I'm here, I'm going to do little isometric holds. So now I'm going to push my entire big toe into the ground, making sure that it doesn't let my met head lift up, but I'm keeping it there. My toe's not scrunching, but I'm just pushing there for about 15 seconds or so. Then I can relax it. Maybe I'm allowed to go into that extension range of motion a little bit more. The other side of it is we're going to work on strength of the toe extensors. So now you're going to try to lift the tip of your big toe up, again, making sure it doesn't actually leave the ground or that first MTP doesn't leave the ground either, and just thinking about as if you're trying to pull your toe into more of that extension. And then you're gonna come back out of it, holding that again for about 15 seconds or so. You can retest your range of motion afterwards just passively and see if it moves a little bit more freely to be able to go into that direction. Next, we're gonna train it. So you can train it by doing calf raises and working on that idea of lifting those heels straight up and working on keeping that met head grounded as you go straight up, and then slowly lower back down, not rolling in, not rolling out. And that's gonna work on dynamically using that extension and using it with strength and muscles versus just passively. Then we can work on the motor control aspect where we can have my foot here, and I'm gonna have a band. In this instance, I'm gonna do it on my left foot, and you can have a band attached to something and you pull it over and place it underneath your first met head. Now, as I'm here, I'm gonna practice coming up and over my foot and going into that heel raise and lift off without losing the band. So you gotta make sure that that band has some stretch on it so it's a little threatening that you don't want it to go away. And then you lower it back down and then walk back. So we're coming up and over, heel lift, that entire big toe stays grounded, and then come back down. So as I come over, if I were to lose that met head and roll to the outside or twist, then that band is gonna snap back into the middle. Now, another thing that can affect how you're going over your foot can be your hips. So even, for example, in this exercise, if you don't have that glute med strength to hold you up and you tend to kind of collapse down, then that's gonna affect how you're loading through your foot. But again, the goal of this video is to look at addressing big toe mobility and particularly big toe extension to help how you stride over that foot and how you push off. That can not only affect what's happening in your foot and ankle, but all the way up the chain into your hips and pelvis.